Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Somebody will check on Dave Mader, who wasn't able to be here in person today, and Ed Reynolds, so they'll be likely calling in. But I want to welcome everybody to our December 8th FirstNet committee meetings. And let me just start out by saying thanks for being here for those of you on the webcast and those in the audience. You know, as I thought about coming to Houston, I said it's always interesting to, in fact, my husband always makes me name all the professional sports teams of any city I go to, so I always get little trivia questions, but I won't go over that today. But I was looking at some interesting facts about Houston that I'm sure you all know, but let me just state a couple of them. You know, 4.4 million square feet of convention space here in Houston. The Metro Houston ranks at the top of American cities for convention venues, so obviously a lot of activity going on here in the city. In 2014, it hosted 364 conventions and brought in about 800,000 visitors to the city. So obviously a lot of activity and a lot of people in one place. It's actually set to host the NC2A Final Four in 2016, so obviously that'll be a big activity for Houston. And the 2017 NFL Super Bowl. Again, lots of people in a single place. Houston is the fourth most populous city in the nation behind New York, LA, and Chicago. And the CMSA, the coverage area here, is 8,778 square miles. Smaller than Massachusetts, but larger than New Jersey. So, you know, probably 3 years ago, I would have looked at those data points and went, well, that's kind of interesting. But after working on the FirstNet project, I think about those data points a lot differently. My lens is a lot different these days. And so when I think about these things, and I think about a lot of people in places and with everything that's going on in our world today, you know, FirstNet is becoming increasingly and urgently important to us. You know, it's really important that we're here today. We've come a long way in three years since the inception of FirstNet, and you can be assured that the focus of the meeting today and tomorrow will be focused on moving this project forward. I want to thank Mayor Parker for her hospitality, and just go back a couple of years, and also thank Todd Early. I haven't seen Todd yet, but also the Department of Public Safety for the great state of Texas, because they are actually one of the first projects that we visited at the very beginning of FirstNet, and they continue to do great things in the it focused on public safety. So just a few facts that I thought would be of interest to you. The format today is going to be a little bit different than we've done in the past. We're going to actually convene all of our committee meetings concurrently, and then we'll quickly go through just a quick review of the minutes, the charter, and some accomplishments, our annual performance review of the committee. So we'll roll through this pretty quickly. And then we'll have updates from the management team on a couple of key areas. So what I'd like to do is have our board secretary, Eli, call the roll of each committee, please.
Happily. The Governance and Personnel Committee, Sue Swenson.
Here.
Jeff Johnson.
Here.
Terry Takai.
Here.
Barry Boniface.
Here.
We have a quorum of the Governance and Personnel Committee. Finance Committee, James Douglas.
Here.
Ed Reynolds. Sue Swenson.
Here.
Dave Mader. Ed Horowitz.
Here.
We have a quorum. Technology, Barry Boniface.
Here.
Ed Reynolds. Kevin McGinnis.
Here.
Suzanne Spalding. Chris Burbank.
Here.
Neil Cox.
Here.
We have a quorum. The Outreach Committee, Jeff Johnson.
Here.
Kevin McGinnis. Terry Takai. Suzanne Spalding. Ron Davis.
Here.
James Douglas.
Here.
Anise Parker. Richard Stanek.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. One thing I wanted to clarify too is that this morning's session will be relatively brief, and then the board will actually be going into closed session for the remainder of the day. Obviously, we have some very significant issues to discuss today in closed session, and because of the procurement sensitivity of those topics, we will be in closed session, and much like we did at our last meeting, we will not do a readout at the end of that. We will come back tomorrow and provide a readout at tomorrow's session. So before we start, I'd like Eli to actually do our typical conflicts notification for the board members. Eli?
Sure. In advance of FirstNet's December 2015 committee and board meetings, the management team has provided the board and committee members with an agenda outlining each of the items that will be discussed and decided during the committee meetings and the board meeting. The members were also provided with a conflicts of interest assessment, which was produced jointly by the Commerce Department Office of General Counsel and FirstNet's Office of Chief Counsel. Providing these documents in advance of the board to board members allows them to identify potential conflicts of interest and to recuse themselves from participation if required. We will, prior to the committee meetings and the full board meeting, remind all board members of their obligations relating to the conflicts of interest and ask them to identify whether any recusals from deliberations or voting are necessary. In consideration of the joint meeting today, each member should consider his or her own obligations with respect to the appropriate committee. And for some of you, that might mean more than one committee based on today's meeting. Just to be clear, we're only doing one conflicts notification for all the joint meetings today. With that said, if there are any board members that believe they must now recuse themselves from either or both meetings, please state so for the record. Seeing none, we are ready to proceed, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. As the chair of the Governance and Personnel Committee, we have a couple of votes to take this morning, and so for the committee members, if you could take a look, and I'm sure you've reviewed the minutes, I'd like to see if there are any comments, corrections, or revisions to the minutes from the previous meetings. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to move those minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Barry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor accepting the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. The minutes are accepted. So if you could put those in the record, Eli.
I will.
And then we've looked at our committee charters, and like any board, we want to review the committee charters every year and make sure that they're up to date. And I think the board has had an opportunity to look at any potential changes. I think Eli, as the board secretary, has made some minor modifications to it. But at this point, is there any discussion on the charter for the Governance and Personnel Committee? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the revised and amended charter.
So moved.
Thanks, Barry. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Terry. Any further discussion? All those in favor of accepting the revised and amended charter, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Any objections or abstentions? The revised charter is approved. One of our processes that we go through every year is to take a look at our actual performance as a committee. And I'm going to have each of the committee chairs, I'll start, go over what our activity has been in the last year. The Governance Committee, I think everybody listening in and watching understands the role of the committee. They review, approve, oversee, and recommend actions related to FirstNet's governance policies and procedure, and we're involved in a lot of employee actions. So looking back over the last year, we actually passed a couple of resolutions, one being related to the release of the draft RFP back in April. And then we also reviewed the final interpretations of the first and second public notice. So resolutions 5 and 6 were relevant to this committee. We also received briefings and advised management on a couple of activities. We recommended to the board the creation of the position of the FirstNet CEO and president, which was a significant move by the Governance Committee. The Governance Committee actually led the search and oversaw the hiring of Mike Poth, the CEO, and T.J. Kennedy, the president of FirstNet, and other C-level positions. So the Governance Committee is quite active in that activity. We also reviewed the operational architecture that was in the draft RFP and obviously will be an important part of the RFP going forward, and provided input to the organizational architecture. At our last meeting, I think you might recall that we reviewed and approved the core values that FirstNet is using within the organization and standards of conduct. And we approved the budget necessary for construction of the new Reston facility, which is a nice upgrade from the dark halls of USGS. Thank you, TJ. We also did performance evaluation of our acting executive director at the time, TJ Kennedy, and we also worked with TJ to do succession planning for the entire executive team. So it was a busy year for the governance committee, and I believe that we fulfilled all of our obligations as a governance committee, but I'm certainly willing to entertain any other comments from the committee. Hearing none, I think we'll pass it on to you, Barry. I think you have some work to be done from technology.
Terrific, Sue. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's good to be here in sunny Houston, particularly in December. I guess the order of business here is to first walk through the minutes and then the committee charter, and then we'll go over the activities of the committee for the year. So I believe everybody from the committee has seen a copy of the minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody have any changes or recommendations with respect to those minutes? Hearing none, I would accept a motion to accept the minutes. So moved. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? The minutes have been accepted. Using that same format, we'll move to the amendments to the committee charter to bring those up to date. Does anybody have any recommendations or changes suggested for the charter? Hearing none, I would accept a motion on that matter. Second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? The charter changes have been accepted. So that takes us to the final matter for the committee this morning, which is to review our activities over the past year, and it was a fairly busy year, with most of that activity obviously around both the advancements of technology as well as the RFP process and the technical aspects of that process. So throughout the year, we passed a couple of important resolutions, the first of which was a resolution to authorize management to publish for comment the draft procurement document that reflects the acquisition roadmap. And then the second resolution that we passed was actually recommending the board approve the final acquisition approach. We received numerous briefings from our famous CTO, Jeff Bratcher, and in a lot of technical areas. First and foremost, we walked through the acquisition strategy, particularly those matters associated with the technical aspects of the RFP. We went through the public notice preliminary and final interpretations, again focusing on the technology aspects of those. Jeff has kept us abreast of the early builder activities and the key learnings from those activities. Matter of fact, I think this afternoon we're going to get a chance to see one of those early builders here in Harris County, which is exciting. We also were kept abreast of what's happening at the PSCR as it relates to the key technologies that are being tested there. In addition to that, Jeff has kept us up to speed on what's happening with various standards that are important to the activities of FirstNet as we move forward, and also, very importantly, kept us abreast of what's happening with the development of the technology team. And we've made a lot of progress in getting the critical players on that team. We had a couple of events in this past year, the first of which was a meeting in Boulder in September 9th, and then we had a follow-on meeting on the 17th and 18th for those who couldn't make it, where we looked at various RFP initiatives, device and app ecosystem strategies, and PSCR lab testing activities. And then some members, thanks to Chief Johnson here, had the opportunity to go to the front lines and participate in the Fire Academy in Oregon, and I'm happy to say that we survived that activity. So, at any rate, God bless the first responders. So with that, anybody have any comments about the Technology Committee activities? And please, no disparaging remarks with respect to the chair of that committee.
Busy year.
Yeah, it was a busy year. It was a busy year. So hearing none, I will pass it over to Chief Johnson.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Barry. Now we're speaking specifically to the Outreach Committee and Consultation and Outreach Committee. And let's start off like the other committees have with consideration of the minutes. So at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve, amend, or reject the minutes before you.
Move. Second.
We have a motion to approve and second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion's passed. Also, this committee will need to pass our revised and amended charter, and I know that the committee members have had the charter before you and had a chance to approve or review it. At this time, the chair to entertain a motion to approve, reject, or amend. We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, those in favor of passing the revised and amended charter signify by saying aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. In the arena of kind of, how we've done this year in terms of looking back and assessing our performance, I think I want to start by thanking each person here on the board and thanking each member of the staff and thanking our Public Safety Advisory Committee. Chief McEwen is here today. I see Jimmy Jeanette. I see Chief Ford here today. I know that Paul Patrick and Tom Sorley either are here and I haven't spotted them or will be. But the PSAC is an important touch point for FirstNet. They are the experts in public safety, the people that are closest to it and doing it every day. And they're the people reviewing what we're doing and making sure that we're focused on the right items and that we're producing a product that at the end of the day people working the street are going to find valuable. So, Harlan, I'd like to thank you, the Executive Committee, and the PSAC for your work. You're a big part of our outreach. I think second to that is the amount of work put in by this board and the staff. I asked the staff to produce for us a list of where we've went. Now, I am prepared to read that list. No, but let's just say we did over 60 events last year where we sent individuals, representatives of staff or board, to meet with the public safety community and to make multiple presentations on what we're up to and make sure we're touching the public safety community. In addition to that, we did 15 Public Safety Association boards of directors. The chair and I have spent many hours in airports.
And we're still talking to each other.
Yeah, we sure are. And most importantly, these conversations we have with the likes of International Association of Chiefs of Police and National Sheriff's Association, Metro Fire Chiefs, et cetera, the conversations that happen with those boards about what they care about, what they need to know more about, what they want to see more of and less of, has really helped kind of refine our outreach and consultation. In addition to that, hats off to the outreach and consultation team for just the landmark work you've done in touching all the states that we've touched. What was the number? We're at 47, 46? Yeah, 46, 47. And I mean, to do that amount of work since we've been standing up has been amazing. And a lot of these states are not easy to get to. Some of the territories require a 12, 14-hour plane ride to get to, and these take big chunks out of otherwise already busy schedules. So I just want to thank you for that. I also want to thank the committee for their work on the public notice and final interpretation process. We already have our 2016 strategic plan for communications, consultation, and outreach in place. Many communications plans almost weekly, Ryan, on key messages that we want to make sure we move out and inspire the right kind of feedback from the community. All in all, I'm proud of the work done by the Communications and Outreach Committee. I'm proud of the consultation work done, Rich, by the entire team, and I'm excited about the 2016 plan. as they say, we're loaded and we're ready to go for 2016. And so I think my last comment is that's a credit to you and the drive that you put forward to make sure that the committees, the staff, and this board are performing. It's appreciated and it makes a difference. So that wraps up the outreach consultation report.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. I think we're ready now to move on to the Finance Committee. I believe Governor Douglas, in your new role as the Finance Chair. Exciting year for you.
Well, it has been an exciting year. I think a good year for the committee, certainly an important year for FirstNet overall. I understand, Madam Chairman, that there was a method in your madness of letting us go last, since I'm a newbie, but we've been through this 3 times, so I think the Finance Committee knows what we should do now. And the first item is the minutes of our last meeting. If you've had a chance to look at them, I'd entertain a motion to approve them.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Not all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Abstentions, the ayes have it. We'll turn to our charter revisions at this point, many of them not too substantive, but to be consistent with the charters of the other committees. I assume the members have had a chance to review them. Are there any questions or thoughts about them, or a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the revisions to our committee charter. Discussion? Not all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. No abstentions. The ayes have it, and we've approved our charter revisions. With respect to performance over the last year, it has been busy, as you indicated, Madam Chairman. We've participated, as other committees have, in reviewing the procurement documents and offered a resolution that reflected the acquisition roadmap. We approved the budget for the current fiscal year. We approved the milestones pursuant to a resolution adopted by the board. We reviewed a proposal and recommended that management be allowed to reallocate up to 10% of funds from any of the major activity categories and to exceed the authorized obligation limits within a certain tolerance. We reviewed the proposed interpretations of the first and second public notices and recommended the approval of those that were presented. We passed a resolution recommending that the board support the final acquisition approach, and we approved the budget necessary to coordinate spectrum relocation from Band 14 through a federal grant program. As with the other committees, we had a number of briefings from our FirstNet staff during the course of the year on acquisition strategy, the financial model, and financial evaluation process in the RFP, and of course the public notice interpretations, both preliminary and final. During the year, we welcomed our new acting CFO, from whom we'll hear a little later in the meeting, and I want to thank Kim in advance for her great work. She provides the committee with a monthly e-newsletter. It's called The Ledger, appropriately, and it presents both graphically and in summary form a report on where we stand against our obligations and expenses, and that's very helpful to the members of our committee. As you know, it's been a challenging few years in terms of preparing a budget and adhering to it, but I think we're in a much better place now, having a better handle on the finances of FirstNet and sticking a lot closer to the budget that's been approved by the board. So I think we made some real progress, and invite members of the committee to add to that report if there are any items you'd like to mention.
Governor, I would just like to add that you commented a little bit about we have a handle on the finances. I think the team did an extraordinary job this past year, I think under Kim Farrington's leadership in her role as a CFO, to get us the information we needed in a timely fashion. So we actually had budgets, I think, reviewed and prepared actually before the beginning of the fiscal year. You know, and it's hard for a startup situation to do that, but I think it's a real tribute, and I think it shows the kind of progress and maturity of the organization.
Yeah, no, I feel good. We're new in relative terms, but really have a handle on things now, I think, and at an appropriate time as we take the next steps moving forward. That's our report.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to move now on to the management reports. I'm going to have Chief Johnson introduce the team that's going to be presenting. So Chief, go ahead and introduce your great team here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to introduce the three people that have had no personal life this last year, Amanda Hilliard, Dave Buchanan, and Rich Reed, to present the update on advocacy. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're pleased to be able to give the committees a brief update on our user advocacy effort. We've got 4 things we want to touch on. Dave and I are going to start with a short staffing and general user advocacy update. Then I'll jump into a national outreach update. Rich Reed is going to provide an update on data collection and state plans. If you'll recall, when the board last met, the September 30th deadline was just upon us, so he's got a lot of good information to share on the work the states and federal agencies have been doing. And then Dave's going to wrap it up with an update on our consultation plans, really focusing on the year ahead. So since we last met with you in October, our team has actually doubled in size, our federal staff. We're pleased to share we've now got 30 federal user advocacy staff members. So we wanted to take a couple of minutes and just to quickly introduce some of the new staff that we've brought on. In particular, all the folks you see here listed on the slide are going to be externally facing. So on the outreach team, we had 3 new senior advisors join the team. Bill Hinkle is now serving as our senior 911 advisor. He comes to FirstNet with 30-plus years of public safety communications experience. Most recently was the Senior Vice President of Strategic Industry Relationships at Intrado, and he had previously served as the Director of Communications for the Hamilton County Department of Communications in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was also a NENA past president. Brent Williams joins as our Senior EMS Senior Advisor. He was previously an EMS radio communications consultant for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Served as 20 years as an practicing paramedic and 11 years as a patrol officer. Also a longstanding member of the SAFECOM Emergency Response Council. Mike Worrell joins as our senior fire advisor. He comes to us from the Phoenix Fire Department, where he was there for 29 years, most recently serving as the Technical Services Division Chief. Many of you know Mike from the Public Safety Advisory Committee, so we were pleased to bring him over. He has also served on national search, urban search and rescue incident support teams, and is a qualified communications unit leader and technician instructor. So all 3 of these individuals bring a lot of great expertise to the team and significant relationships across the country, and have already really jumped right into our efforts. So we're pleased to have them on board and join Josh Edheimer, who's been serving as the Senior Law Enforcement Advisor. We also had 2 new staff join our tribal outreach team, and again, thank you to Kevin for participating in that hiring process. Margaret Muir recently joined. She's an enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation in Oklahoma, and was formerly the Director of Emergency Services for the Agua Caliente tribe. Adam Geisler joined. He's an enrolled member of the La Jolla Nation, or the La Jolla Indians in California, and served as the secretary of their tribal council. So again, both were PSAC tribal working group members. Both tribal members were really excited to have them on board, and they have also kind of jumped right in and helped with some of the recent engagements we've done with the tribal community. So I'll turn it over to Dave to talk a little bit about our consultation hires.
Good morning. We, on the consultation side, added 7 new staff members since the last board meeting. We developed a new position, area lead position. We've hired 2 experienced individuals to help us bring leadership experience and strategic thinking to our regional consultation outreach approach. Jeff King comes to us most recently where he's a Deputy Assistant Director at ICE, formerly at DHS, and is currently a law enforcement officer with Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C. Steve Smith comes to us with more than 30 years' experience, most recently as a Deputy CIO at ICE, Deputy CIO at the Federal Highway Administration, White House Communications Agency. Both of them bring a mix of federal and private sector experience, again, bring a lot of leadership and experience to our outreach team and our consultation team. On our regional leads, we've hired 3 individuals, many of which are probably familiar to many of you. Mike Varney comes to us from the state of Connecticut, where he was the SPOC in Connecticut. He currently serves as the Region 1 regional lead. Lori Stone comes to us where she was the acting SPOC in Maryland. She was now serves us as the Region 3 regional lead. And Jackie Miller from New Mexico team, familiar to many of you, just joined us last week and now serves us as the Region 6 regional lead. So a lot of good experience with folks who've been around the states and our stakeholders for a very long time, and we're grateful to add them to the team. And finally, on the federal side, we were able to add 2 new members to Chris Algier, who's our federal consultation lead, Tiffany Perry and Charlotte Whitaker. Again, both of them bring a substantial federal and private sector experience. Both come most recently from federal government agencies. They're going to bring a lot of expertise and experience in working with federal agencies as we go through our federal consultation process.
Dave, can I just say something?
Please.
I just wondered if Daryl Ackley is still talking to us.
I don't know that answer yet, Sue, but we're going to work on it.
Okay, thanks.
So I want to move along to our strategic offsite we held last week. As Chief Johnson mentioned earlier, we built a strategic plan for 2016, starting with our offsite back in June, where we brought our team together. We're just coming off last week having brought together the 40 members of our consultation, outreach, state plans, government affairs, and communications team to come together last week for a 3-day meeting. And the purpose that is really to operationalize the strategic plan we put together this summer, to align our teams, and really to bring about an approach that will help make us successful in reaching our goals in 2016. There are 2 main outcomes and 2 main takeaways I think we got from the meeting. One was we held an 8-hour what we call message boot camp, brought everybody together in one room. We went through 23 different key issues at FirstNet to bring the issues to bear, to discuss the issues, to talk about the key talking points on those issues, answer questions. And really, the takeaway, I think, was bringing about an enhanced baseline aptitude for the issues amongst all 40 members of our team. Some of our team members have only worked for us for 1 week, and some have been here for 2.5 years, and making sure everybody's speaking with the same message and the same voice. Key takeaway, and we're going to continue to really echo that message boot camp every week at our staff meetings, and do that in probably a 20-minute form around one issue, and then quarterly bring folks back together to continue to drive this. This is maybe our most important issue from a team management perspective, is making sure everybody's singing off the same song sheet, and that we are delivering the same message in Alaska as we are in Florida, and we're bringing the same message to law enforcement as we are to firefighters. So I think we made a lot of good progress with that, and very satisfactory review from our team on the experience they had with that. And the second takeaway was building what we're calling state engagement strategies. We were able to finalize and build 6 of these. We have 50 more to do before the end of the calendar year. But what we did was bring, again, our team, our sort of disparate parts from across the agency, from consultation and outreach, state plans, government affairs, all who have outward-facing responsibilities, all who have outward-facing jobs, but all who share the same goals. We all have the same goals in California and the same goals in New York. Bringing together those team members to align our activities, to bring about a strategic approach with those activities, and to have a coordinated, collaborated action plan for the year. Again, critically important as we're about to embark on an even busier 2016 than we had for 2015. So again, a great couple days with the full team, some good opportunities for folks to get to know each other a little bit, and I think we're on a very good path for getting started in 2016.
Dave, just a comment on your user advocacy goals, and maybe Chief Johnson wants to comment on this, but your second bullet talks about preparing governors for state plan decision. I mean, I think that probably is a very significant goal. Could you just say a little bit more, and I'd like the Chief to comment as well. Sure.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the later slides, but it probably is our most important activity for the year as we think about all of the work we're going to do. It's all geared around this year of finishing our planning, our FirstNet planning for the delivery of state plans. And we recognize that the governor's decision isn't likely to be just something one person's going to make. There'll be a lot of individuals, key influencers, key officials, key cabinet members, key public safety executives who all are going to weigh in, play a role in informing and influencing the governor, and really informing and influencing what that state engagement plan is going to look like in that state. Every state's different. There are different players in each state. We can't have the same plan in North Dakota as we do in Iowa. And that's part of the planning we had to go through, is think about what's the critical path to the governor's decision, what's most important to that state, and how are we going to customize our activities around all these new players and the 40-plus people we have that are outward facing to make sure we achieve that. That's a big part of what we're going to do this year.
I think what's also challenging is the the evolving staff, because you have a lot of changes as well. So keeping up with all of those changes is going to be a real challenge for us.
Absolutely.
And Madam Chair, I think to your point, just because we were in South Dakota last year doesn't mean anything 2 years from today, potentially. You know, staff changes, and, you know, when the players change, then we've got to go back and cover the messaging bases again. I think the most important thing that we can do for our team as it relates to state consultation and preparing the governors is very clearly articulate what each path looks like. And, you know, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what those steps are in the path, what the decision points are, how long they take, what are the ramification costs, et cetera, et cetera. And then try to build a package around that for not only the governor, but the SPOC, who is the point of contact for the governor, and the broader team, which often includes public safety and a broader cast of people that support the governor. Try to put this package together in a way that is understandable and people know the benefits and consequences of each decisional path. And that's why this has been so important that, number one, we assemble our team. Number two, that we get everybody singing off the same sheet of music, as you say. And as we reach out to the governor, we've done our homework. It is as accurate as humanly possible, and that each one is customized and unique because the states are very different.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So picking up on the offsite, I just wanted to talk a minute about our customer relationship management tool, which you might recall we launched that in early October, and we've been working hard to get staff all trained on that since about mid-October. We have 60 users now on the system, and that is comprised of the user advocacy, government affairs, and communications team. And we'll be working over the next couple of weeks to expand that to some of the CTO and legal staff who are also externally facing with some of our potential customers. So just really quickly, I wanted to mention we're primarily using the tool right now to log all our contacts, our interactions with those contacts, phone calls, emails, et cetera, as well as all the events, you know, the conferences, all those engagements that we have been doing. I'm pleased that all the 2015 events have been now logged into the CRM system, as well as all the 2016 engagements that we've identified to this point. So moving forward, we still have a lot of work left to do on the system to enhance some of the reporting and functionality, so making it a little more user-friendly when folks go into it and, for example, want to view by region or by state, you know, what's going on. We are also working with Jim Quinn's team to purchase a portal functionality, which will integrate with the CRM, which will help us to facilitate more dialogue and document and information sharing with the SPOCs, the PSAC, some of our other key stakeholders, as well as help with some of our event management. And then lastly, we'll also be working to integrate the CRM with Microsoft Outlook and some of the other Microsoft products. So I would be happy to pull up the system over the next couple days if anyone is interested to take a peek in that offline. So moving into that, I wanted to just do a couple of quick updates on our national outreach efforts. This slide here just gives you a quick snapshot of the number of events. And when I say events, I mean conferences, you know, state outreach meetings, et cetera. 60 of those are the ones that Chief Johnson had mentioned that the board had participated in. So you see from 2014 to 2015, we've significantly increased the number of events that we have gone out and supported and spoken at. And obviously, I think that goes hand in hand with the staffing increase that you have seen happen. So we're pleased about that, the number of stakeholders that we have reached. I know it's a little hard to read, but the chart on the right there shows you, in the red there, about half of the events that we had done, a little over half, were really focused at the state and local level, which I think probably isn't surprising to folks here. That encompasses the 46 consultation meetings that had taken place in the calendar year. And then the next big chunk in the dark blue there is our engagement with the national associations. So moving forward, as we start to plan for 2016, our team spent a lot of time last week also looking at the National Engagement Association calendar, as well as the national and regional tribal events for the coming year, mapping out those dates and starting to pull together staffing plans, which we'll be reviewing with many of you, and starting to secure a lot of those speaking events. I think, we're going to be a lot more strategic about where we go in the coming year. Putting the right people. We've got a lot of new staff, people with a lot of good expertise background, so getting the right people to go to those engagements, and then working hand in hand with Ryan and the communications team on sort of the plans they've developed for messaging throughout the year. So we're really looking forward to that. I wanted to take a minute just to talk about, this slide here shows a couple of the key national events that staff and many of the board members and leadership have participated in just since the October 1st board meeting. I counted we had almost 90 events between October 1st and the end of this calendar year, so a really busy last couple of months for the team. I wanted to just touch on the IACP event was probably the biggest one that we had done in the last quarter, and thanks to Josh Edheimer and Sheriff Stanek and Chief Burbank for the work and kind of pulling that together. As folks may know, the IACP conference was in Chicago, combined with the Major City Chiefs Conference and the Performance Executive Research Forum. FirstNet participated in over 30 sessions there. Sheriff Stanek and TJ were able to address all the major city chiefs in that plenary forum at the beginning of their meeting. We also had a couple of breakout panel sessions, spoke at a number of committee meetings throughout the couple of days there. Met with the Illinois Spock and his team, and then also had a great visit at the Chicago Emergency Management and Communications Center. So I think a really valuable couple of days that we spent there in Chicago touching the law enforcement community. So again, as we move forward, I mentioned we're working to lock in the schedule for the national events for 2016. But then the outreach team, as Dave mentioned, will also be active in supporting many of the state events, as well as working to bring help participate in the tribal events with the SPOCs. So looking forward to that. Wanted to touch quickly just on the social media work, again, that our communications team is primarily working. A lot of great work done there. Over the past year, we've seen the number of followers, both on our Twitter and LinkedIn pages, over double. So good efforts there. I think Twitter continues to be one of the best ways that we are quickly getting information out to our key stakeholders. You probably noticed, for those of you that are on Twitter, a number of our state SPOC teams are using that as well, so it's a good way to communicate with our stakeholders. The team's been putting out about 3 blogs a week, many of which we see getting picked up by the press media. Most recently, the technical team worked on the Bring Your Own Devices blog, as well as some blogs on new hires, again, that we've seen picked up by the media outlets. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight was 2 new videos that we recently put out, FirstNet and Next Generation 911 and FirstNet in Canada. TJ used each of those for the APCO Tech Forum and then CTIG that he was at last week. Again, great work by the comms team. I think those are really helpful when we're putting out our message and to kind of enhance the presentations that we give. And obviously something that our state SPOCs can use as well in their outreach efforts. So lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the October SPOC meeting, or Spocktoberfest, as folks started to call it. We had really great participation again in this meeting, 51 states and territories, over 125 participants, so each state was again allowed to bring up to 3 attendees. Our PSAC Executive Committee had representation there, as well as the Tribal Working Group. Thank you to the board members that came, Chief Johnson, Kevin McGinnis, Sheriff Stanek, Governor Jim Douglas, and Neil Cox. It was, I think, really valuable to have board members presenting, speaking with the stakeholders, and of course, I'm sure all those hallway conversations were quite valuable as well. I think the timing of this meeting worked out really well. It followed the October board meeting where some key decisions were made on the RFP, the public notice, so it was a great opportunity to kind of continue the messaging there, answer questions immediately following that meeting. Really good opportunity for Dave and the team to socialize our plans for consultation in 2016. So we continue to get really good feedback on the meeting, all favorable responses that we received. And this last slide here just highlights a number of the different topics that we had covered throughout the 2 days there. We had Jeff Bratcher's team out there. We also highlighted a number of SPOCs in the early builder sessions and many of the outreach sessions. So a great 2 days that we spent out there. If you'll recall, we did 2 SPOC meetings in 2015, and that worked out really well, and we plan to do that again in 2016. I'm working now to identify a good date, probably in the March, April timeframe, and we'll keep you informed of that. The last thing Chief Johnson had mentioned, we do have a couple of Public Safety Advisory Committee members here in the audience, which we're pleased to have them here. Chief McEwen is going to give an update tomorrow on the PSEC, so I won't steal any of his thunder, but a lot of great work that they have done over the last year, so looking forward to hearing about that, and of course spending tomorrow afternoon and Thursday with the committee. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rich Reed.
Can I just ask one question? Federal engagement, that you kind of highlighted there on the SPOC. We didn't talk about it much, and I think there's been some changes. Could you bring us up to date on how we're engaging with our federal partners now?
Federal engagement, yeah. Do you want to cover it?
Sure. So as you heard me mention, we've recently hired 2 new team members. They're going to join Chris Algier, who's our federal consultation lead. We used 2015 similarly in the federal agencies as they did with the states, bringing them an initial consultation meeting to bring them sort of introductory information about what FirstNet was, what the value proposition of FirstNet is for federal agencies and federal law enforcement entities, federal first responders. 2016, we will continue that effort to build those relationships and really prepare those agencies for the purchase decision that they're going to make in the future. They don't have a state decision like states do, but they will have a customer decision they'll have to make, and we're really working towards bringing them information so that we can increase their readiness for that, understand what their data points are so we can weave those into the state plans and the planning of FirstNet. We've obtained data from federal entities already, and that will continue as well. And there really is, especially in border states and places where there's sort of large federal installments, have really helped enhance the planning we're doing in those states to bring about an even more robust state planning.
So do they come together as a group, or do we deal with the federal entities individually, like individual states?
They do come as a group, but we
Okay.
work, I think, most effectively working with them individually. Just like with the states, they come together periodically like we do with our
Okay.
SPOC Fest, but
Okay.
the best engagement and the best connections we have are the individual meetings that we're holding between the FirstNet team and the leadership from these federal agencies.
Okay, great, thank you.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Rich.
Good morning, everyone. The last time we met, we talked about the closing of a data collection that was very important to FirstNet. I promised you I'd come back with some information about how successful we were, and I'm happy to share that I believe we were wildly successful. We had participation from 54 of the 56 states and territories, which is extraordinary for a data collection. 7 federal agencies participated as well. That's also a very large number of federal agencies to participate with no real incentives to do so. This was just because they thought it was a good idea and they thought the mission was worthwhile to take the time out of their day. There was no financial incentive, no grant dollars. They just knew it was important to their agency. The quantity and depth of data, as you can imagine, with 54,000 files and 15 gig of data being delivered to FirstNet, was a little overwhelming. It's a tremendous amount of information, and the data that we received was comprised of not only 54,000 files, but the data from 1,160 public safety-facing surveys, either through the partnership with the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Emergency Communications, and their mobile data survey tool, or the surveys that were developed and generated by the states for surveying within the state. Phenomenal amount of information that was provided. 1.6 million public safety personnel accounted for through those surveys. So we have a really solid perspective on how public safety leverage mobile data today, how they buy it, what they care about, what applications they care about. We really have a firm understanding how mobile data is used today. This information obviously could not have been provided to FirstNet without a really strong partnership and the SLIGP grant program. So I want to thank all of their work as well to make sure the states had the funding to do what they needed to do in providing FirstNet this data. As I mentioned, the quantity and depth of data was pretty immense. I want to just give you a few examples of the diversity of data, which is a bit of a challenge for FirstNet. We wanted to make sure that the states had the ability, states and territories, I'm going to use the term state generally, but states and territories had the flexibility to provide us the information in a really non-structured way. We wanted to put the burden on us to analyze and to make the data conform and to pull out the usable intelligence. We didn't want to be overly burdensome to the states and territories because that we thought would lower participation. We also wanted the states to be able to leverage the multitude of tools they already had at their disposal. So we wanted them to be able to provide us the information in any format that they had it easily accessible again so that we get larger quantities of data and better more usable data. So as you can see, states took that flexibility to the maximum. The information they provided was very diverse. There's several different formats. And the team that we put together really had to go through and do a significant analysis of the data to extract the intelligence. I want to thank at this time the leadership of Brian Hobson, the SPAWAR team, as well as LGI, who brought a group of outstanding analysts to the table to normalize and make this data usable. Other examples of more empirical type data, as you can see, some of this information came in tabular and bar graphs and spot charts. There's a tremendous diversity in the type of data provided that we needed to aggregate and bring sort of context to. So since September 30th, we've worked with the regional leads under Dave's supervision, the government affairs team, the state planning team, as well as my analysts to go out and take this information, do an analysis of the information, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't making any assumptions with that data that were inappropriate. Because of the diversity of data, because there were some gaps in the data, we felt it was reasonable and appropriate to call each state and say, here's what we've derived from the information you provided. Is it accurate? Are we making the right assumptions? Is this what you intended to say? So I'd like to state that we went through and contacted all 56 states and territories in a 2-week period and went through their data collection with them to ensure that we were extracting the right intelligence from that information. It was an extraordinary effort by my team to get it done in that time frame.
And how accurate were you?
Very. So it gave us the opportunity to not only say these are the assumptions we made, but we also wanted to make sure that we sourced the data properly, that their source may be better than our source in turn may be better than their source. We wanted to have that dialogue so that everyone agreed on the information we were going to leverage going forward. So we completed those follow-up calls in a 2-week period, ending them in October. The team is just now completing the FirstNet data aggregation, where we're bringing all of that user data and all of the coverage objectives data into a format that we can then apply to the RFP process, as well as the future consultation process. It's going to be really important that potential offerers have this perspective provided by the state so they can fully understand whenever they provide a response to our RFP, that they fully appreciate what the state's provided us. Obviously, my team is still supporting consultation, government affairs, and ultimately developing the process for state plans. That is an ongoing task. So a little bit of history. How many people have seen this map before? This is the coverage baseline that we produced based on a nationwide data set where we took law enforcement, fire, EMS personnel numbers, public safety identifiers and risk areas, U.S. population, developed areas and total building counts, as well as primary and secondary roads and their usage, and map the data in a way that would allow states to really see where we had empirical data to associate with what's important. We provided this information with them with a simple ask. Take this nationwide data set and make it better. Provide us your subject matter expertise, your knowledge of your state, your knowledge of response, and then modify the map and give it back to us so that we really understand. This is just a flat data set. It doesn't say good or bad. What we want you to do is tell us what's important. The states responded. They did what we asked them to do. So I'm going to go through very quickly. If we normalize that data and we take the colors out, and we just show sort of the baseline data set as gray. And then we start overlaying the input. For example, this is the input we received from the federal agencies that responded. Overlaying that in purple, you can see that there are some areas that stand out. If we inverse that, you can see that the baseline accounted for most of the federal input. We're lucky enough that we got some additional federal specificity from that collection, but generally speaking, the baseline that we put forth covered what the Fed said was important to them. So we make that the new federal FirstNet baseline, inclusive of federal input. Now we overlay the state and local input. Now you can see the diversity in which states took the flexibility of FirstNet and given them in terms of modifying the coverage objectives. You can see that some states, and there are two colors there, and I apologize, it's a little difficult to see from this distance, but there's a light green and a dark green. The dark green represents states that really took the FirstNet objectives and followed our direction to a T. They basically said, this is in addition to your baseline, things that matter to the state, and we have a substantiated way to talk about it, either through response data or subject matter expertise, but they grew the baseline by a small percentage. Other states took a more broad approach, and they used land mobile radio or commercial service as their baseline. And we want to be able to sort of show both of those approaches to potential bidders through the acquisition process. So this is a really good aggregate map that depicts what FirstNet baseline looked like, what the state input looked like through both methodologies, as well as the federal input. So we believe this is a very solid depiction of the proposed FirstNet baseline objectives. So what do we intend to do with this information? We intend to make this information available in the reading room or bidder's library so that potential offerers will have access to the information the state's provided us. They can look at it, use it. They can, help more refine or develop their bid associated with the information that's inclusive of the FirstNet goals and objectives as well as the state goals and objectives. We also intend to leverage that information as a baseline or an input to the evaluation process and ensure that the state perspective is considered through that evaluation process. It's going to also help us develop a more robust FY16 consultation process. Going through the data provided and having a robust dialogue about the quantity, nature, and the growth of mobile data usage in the state is going to be critical for FY16. And then we're going to develop a nationwide report that helps outline and explain the nationwide data set and have that be one of the sort of legacy documents of the data collection. Ultimately, we're going to weave this information into the state planning process. And with that, if there's no questions, I'm going to hand it back over to Dave Buchanan.
Actually, I do have a question, a couple of questions. One, when you showed the federal map with the purple,
Yes, ma'am.
it looked like there's some remote areas that were not covered by the national, kind of the national footprint. Can you say a little bit about those areas that sort of popped up?
So are you talking the outlying areas?
Yeah, I mean, in the less in the less, dark areas, and then purple popped up.
Yeah, so some of this data, because it's GIS mapping data, are anomalies. So
Okay.
they're just mapped to the wrong location because they're the wrong inputs.
Okay.
Other are things that, for example, a deployed military or Coast Guard operation may have said we had a response there.
Okay.
Or we oftentimes have response there, but they're
Okay.
out on the other side of the border. There may have been mutual aid provided. There may have been an airdrop. It may have been a search and rescue operation. So
Okay.
I don't have the specific data associated with why those are important to say the Coast Guard or the Border Patrol.
Okay.
We didn't get into that level of specificity, but this is the information that they provided that we then mapped to the locations they said. So I don't know why they
Okay.
were there, just
Okay.
that area was important to them.
Okay, great. Well, that's good to know. And then the other thing is on the green, if you can pop to the green map, the new green map, the consolidated map, the state and local. Yeah, that one. So are there any implications to the data we're providing to potential offers because states may have taken a little bit different approach to the data input?
I don't think so. I mean, that's why we're showing both.
Okay,
We made it, fairly purposeful
Okay.
to be able to show layers, that we have the first net baseline. We have the baseline based on sort of the subject matter expertise, and then we overlay in a lighter color the more broadened approach, which is LMR-based or commercial-based.
Okay.
So bidders will be able to extrapolate that how they
Okay.
deem appropriate.
Okay.
In some cases, the best case scenario is bidders would be able to cost effectively provide coverage in those areas. What we wanted to provide is the bidders the information that the states provided FirstNet without
Okay.
a value judgment.
okay, great, thank you. Sorry, Dave, I just had a couple questions. You're on.
So we've used the time since the last board meeting to finish our planning and our approach, finalizing our approach for consultation for 2016. I'm going to use the next couple slides to talk to you about what that approach is and how we plan on executing that. One of the key activities that occurred in October after the last board meeting is we were able to bring versions of our approach and early samples of our approach to the SPOC meeting. We used that SPOC meeting to get there, brief them on what our goals and objectives were, what our desired approach was, answer their questions and get their feedback. And it was very productive. And I think really a great way to do business with the states to allow them to help us shape the program we're going to bring them in 2016. And so we have three key goals that we're going to use the consultation program to drive towards in 2016. One is to continue to expand our outreach. Second is to continue to obtain important inputs regarding network policies and processes. And third is to prepare decision makers for the decision about FirstNet with the governor and with the network deployment. There are really four key elements that make up our consultation approach for 2016 that we want to pursue in order to help us achieve those goals. First is a SPOC kickoff meeting, and we're going to do this in early part of the year. And this will help us plan for the consultation activities for the year. It will also help us align our activities with the states to make sure that our state engagement strategies and the work that we're doing with Amanda's team and Ed's team and Rich's team are very much aligned with what the state is doing as well. We want to be able to leverage the work they're doing and take advantage of that to help us be successful. Second is we want to connect and consult with leaders using their existing governance body meetings. We're going to do this in early part of 2016. And again, it's, I think, a great way to connect us to the key officials and key leaders in the state, bring them new information about our acquisition in early part of 2016, and continue to obtain state inputs along the way. As we get more information about what's important to the state, we need to bring that back and build that into the state planning for that particular state. Third is the creation of what we're calling consultation task teams. And in this instance, we want to connect and consult with subject matter experts in the states, ask the states to bring us the very specific people who are the best experts on a series of consultation issues. In 2016, we want to leverage the work that the PSAC has already done with respect to prioritization, with public safety grade, bring those topics to the states, and allow us to consult directly with the folks in the states who have a very specific expertise on those particular issues, bring that information back and build that into our network operation and management planning. And fourth, the fourth element for consultation 2016 is what we're calling the executive consultation meeting. This is really the culmination of the work for the year, bringing together, again, the key influencers, key decision makers, key officials in state, local, tribal government who are going to be important to the governor's decision or important to the network deployment decision in that state. We'll bring new information to those executives. We'll make it an executive-ready meeting as opposed to the 8-hour, full-day offering we had in 2015. This will be executive-ready 2-hour engagements, being respectful of their time and making best use of our time. Again, to bring in the later part of 2016 the most important information that's important to that particular state that we've gathered through the earlier engagements, be able to have a consultation engagement around that and be able to share and understand the process the state's going to go through in order to reach the governor's decision. I think one of the big differentiators, if you look at our approach next year versus what we just concluded with the initial consultation, is that this is targeted. It's targeted around issues and targeted around specific people. As opposed to the sort of all-comers, one big meeting, everyone attends for 8 hours. We're going to have smaller bites, but very targeted to targeted individuals. And the second issue is going to be very much more specific. 2015 initial consultation really revolved around introductions, introducing the people, introducing the topics, introducing the data to FirstNet, introducing the state's needs to FirstNet. We're going to get much more specific around these targeted officials and targeted activities in 2016 to bring about more fidelity around the planning of the network and planning for their state.
Dave, just an observation. It's on the consultation side, we're narrowing and making more precise our communication. And it's a higher level of detail, more specific, quicker shot, actively engaging this very smaller and critical group. On the outreach side, we're doing the opposite. We're broadening it. While the last 18 months to 2 years, we focused with the leadership of the associations, key decision makers and influencers as it relates to what we do, we're now moving down to the level of people that are working the streets, the chiefs of departments, the leadership of individual departments. You know, we've gotten to this place where you run into a chief and they say, well, I don't know what FirstNet is. And we just haven't had the capacity, bandwidth, or staff to reach beyond the leadership of the trade associations and the key influencers in this world. So, you know, my congratulations to the team for, number one, on the consultation side, narrowing and focusing, and then on the outreach side, broadening and deepening. And I think those are two very distinct operations, but I think hats off to doing it very different.
Yeah, that's a great observation, and it's exactly what we're trying to do, bring about a much more dynamic strategy that's able to incorporate both of those approaches to what we're going to do in 2016. Leads very nicely into my next, go ahead,
Dave,
Sue.
Dave,
Sure.
one thing. You talk about a 2-hour executive consultation meeting. I don't know what kind of feedback you've gotten, but it seems that asking whoever you're meeting with, one, how much time they have and what the topics are is really critical. You probably have a concept in mind, but you know, I don't know, you know, 2 hours, I mean, it doesn't seem like a long time, but these folks are very busy, right? So I'm sure you're going to have to flex a little bit on that.
Yep, we are, and there'll be some states that are going to request more, and some have already indicated they want the full day treatment. Okay, we can do
Okay.
that. We're happy to do that.
Okay.
There are some states that have already indicated they'd really like us to get in and out of there in 60 minutes. They want to
Okay.
have the read-aheads done, they want to have the briefings done, and I think, I haven't mentioned this yet, but we're going to take more advantage of our video creation capabilities at
Okay.
FirstNet in order to bring information to the states in advance of the meeting, so we don't have to spend nearly as much time readying them for decision and discussion. Send that ahead, prepare them in advance, and Ryan's team is doing a great job already getting those together for us, and we'll take advantage of that to hopefully make meetings just much more efficient.
Right. Like you said, everyone's a little bit different, so depending on their schedules and their interest, I think you're going to have to tailor it.
And I want to
probably.
emphasize that. We
Yeah.
want to work with the states. If
Okay.
the states want a one-day meeting, if the states want a three-day meeting, we can
Okay.
work with them.
Okay.
We did a three-day meeting for California last year. That was the right amount for a big state like California.
Right.
There are other places where either the work is well established and they're well informed, or we can do it much shorter than that.
Okay. And you also haven't, I don't think, I may have missed it, but you haven't mentioned, you guys, I think, are working much more collaboratively inside of FirstNet with your government affairs counterparts, right? So all of this work that you guys are doing is all integrated with Mr. Parkinson and his great government affairs team.
Yep, so they participated in our offsite last
Okay.
week. They're integrated into our strategies. There's one strategy for each state, and we all have different roles to do it, and we're now using these state engagement strategies to weave together the different players and the different parts. Ed has aligned his team regionally as well. I think that's a great way to target their activities around those particular states, and they're working hand in glove with our regional teams and with Amanda's outreach teams and with Rich's state plans team to, I think, bring a single product in several shapes to these states. So in addition to the different approach, and very much in line with the conversation we're having right now, we also envision really expanding the kinds of people, the kinds of officials, the kinds of organizations that we conduct our education, outreach, and consultation with. I think one of the key takeaways or learnings we had from 2015 was really the different types of individuals and different types of organizations that really need to be brought into the consultation process and need to be brought into the team of people that are going to help influence the governor in 2016 and beyond. Some of them are mentioned here. There'll be others in other states. But this really just an illustration that we're thinking very broadly, as you mentioned, Chief Johnson, about the kinds of people we want to reach. We now have the teams of experts and the teams across the country that can help us reach them, and bringing a Big Ten approach to who's going to be part of the state engagement strategy and who's going to be really important to the state's decision for the governor and for network deployment. Important part of what I think differentiates how we started this in 2014 and 15 and where we want to go in 2016.
Just a question, maybe this is a question for Chief Burbank and Sheriff Stanek, and that is, you know, we've talked at previous board meetings about how well are we doing getting the message to the people who are going to be the users of this network, you know, the use cases. I know we've done some work in the last year, but I'd love to hear your input on, are we making progress there, and then what other things do we need to be thinking about relative to touching those folks? So,
Chair, I'll take the first stab at it. I will say that, you know, it was about a year ago that I joined the FirstNet board, and I, like a lot of my colleagues, had a lot of concerns about FirstNet and particularly the outreach. I will say, though, over the last year with 60-plus events, and I think I've been to a vast majority of them, you know, we've spoken to chiefs and sheriffs and law enforcement officers and 911 PSAT managers across the country. I think that FirstNet has really come into its own in terms of letting people know who they are, what we're trying to do and accomplish, and the timeline by which that'll get that done. A lot of it goes to the staff as you continue to build it under Mike's leadership and TJ's leadership and the committee chairs. But I'm very pleased by it, and I can tell you, I'm like Chris. I'm engaged in a number of different national organizations on the sheriff's side, and somewhat with the police chiefs. But we've made quite an impact over the last year. If that trend continues, it can only be to the betterment of our FirstNet and what we're trying to do across this country to build out this public safety wireless network.
I agree completely with Rich. I think the only area that we probably need to do a better job, but it's the more difficult area, is actually reaching the line level personnel, because it is very hard to ensure that when we talk to a chief, when we talk to a sheriff, that their interest is such a level that they're passing it on to all their people. And so I think as the RFP is released, I think we have some very good momentum points that, you know, we ought to start focusing on getting some information out to that line level officer, because that also creates a tremendous amount of pressure when you talk about states participating in everything else. If the buzz is, oh, we want that, right? That's important for our job. I think that will create a nice bit of momentum as we go forward.
You know, Madam Chair, that's going to be a tougher nut to crack, because as much as those organizations are led by their chief law enforcement officers, it seems to me that FirstNet has tried to reach the line officers, line deputies, the worker bees through the unions. And the unions, their leadership has been somewhat resistant to help us allow access to them. And so, you know, I was just communicating with Josh here a few minutes ago via email saying, look, 2016's here. You know, tell us what you want to do the first 6 months of 2016, and we'll try and get it done. But the one thing that Chris hits on is the line officers, the line deputies, the individuals who are actually going to be the users of the network, and have them push up rather than just us pushing down from their leadership.
thank you. That's I had a feeling about that, so I think that's an opportunity for the staff to look at, working with, I think, the respective board members to see what we can do there. I think some of the things you've talked about in terms of videos and just thinking about outreach to that group, I think, is an important element. I think we're at that stage now where it's probably time. Okay.
Thank you. So last slide, I just want to talk about our milestones and the time frame we see for executing this. We're going to launch really the 2016 consultation later this month. with the 2016 consultation package. We'll plan the FirstNet and SPOC kickoff meetings for later this month and into 2016. In the second row, you see our governance body meetings. We expect those to go from kind of January to June time frame. Different states meet at different times. Some meet weekly, some meet monthly, some meet quarterly, and we'll use that sort of first 2 quarters of 2016 to deliver that information. And that'll be a great place to bring the latest and greatest information about where we are with our acquisition. Our consultation task teams will really be taking place starting in February and continue through the summer. And again, we'll work with the states to work at their pace. It'll culminate with our regional consultation task team engagements. We'll take advantage of webinars. We'll also bring people together in person so we can learn together regionally. I think it's another takeaway from 2015 was the appetite states had to, particularly in these network operations issues, learn from each other and sort of compare notes across state borders about how they look and see things like public safety grade and things like prioritization. And then finally, the executive consultation meeting. You see at the very bottom there, we expect those to happen in the later half of the year as more of our sort of acquisition and state planning issues have ripened a bit more. We'll have more information to bring. At the same time, in a parallel path, these governor's office meetings, the meetings we're able to schedule directly with governors. So 2 different activities, but both critically important, and we really want to have both with each state, the direct meeting with our executives and the state executive, and the direct meeting between the key FirstNet staff and the people that will be influential to the governor. Absolutely important to us being successful in getting through 2016 and pointing towards 2017.
Well, I, for one, want to thank TJ in particular for the leadership of this effort. You know, I think back a couple of years when we first started talking about consultation. You know, we've come a long way, TJ, and I just want to thank you personally for the leadership you provided in this area, because without that, I don't think we would be where we are today. So, you know, on behalf of the board, and I know Chief Johnson feels as strongly about this as I do, I know the board does, really appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Great job by the team. I mean, we have an amazing team, and as you saw, it's continuing to grow. And I think having that ability to get out to more, and like Chief Johnson talked about, that outreach capability to be able to get into more people and talk to them about what's really coming and help them understand, it's going to be terrific.
Thank you very much. Well, Barry, I think we're on to the technology update. So do you want to do some introductions or an introduction?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, Dave, Amanda, Rich, and TJ. I'm exhausted just thinking about that level of activity. But a nap is not on the agenda, so I guess we will move on to Jeff Bratcher. Now, as many of you know, Jeff has been acting for a while, but finally his acting career is over. And we've now made Jeff the permanent CTO at FirstNet in a much-deserved promotion, and we're delighted with that. Jeff has done a terrific job of not only marshaling our technical efforts as it relates to this RFP down the field, but also building a world-class team of experts to help us in that endeavor. So with that, Jeff, will you give us your
Jeff, just 1 minute. I just want to acknowledge the fact that Ed Reynolds has joined us by phone. Mayor Parker, you may have noticed, arrived, and also Suzanne Spalding from Department of Homeland Security. So I just want to acknowledge those board members.
How's that? Can you hear me now? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the kind words and look forward to pushing this on across the goal line with the RFP. So thank you for the introduction. I'd like to jump. I've got a quick update. Mike slashed about 10 of my slides out last night, so he wants to get to the meat of the discussion later today, but I've got a few key slides I'd like to go over with you today and answer any questions. So one thing I'll focus on is our recent hiring, some RFP development, and really the CTO focus on the RFP development, some highlights, early builder updates, and the PSCR efforts. So where are we at now at FirstNet in Boulder? So one thing, it was, you know, everyone says the CTO office in Boulder. It's actually more than that. We do have user advocacy, IT. Our program management office has 2 staff out there, as well as some of our contractors. So we've got the office, I think, in a good spot now. We're focused in this fiscal year on the test and validation lab and building out some of those key capabilities that we'll need for quality assurance and surveillance for the RFP post-award. So we're working to get that in place now and have that ready to go in this, probably the summertime. Some of our recent hiring updates, I'd like to highlight Ebony Murray, who we were actually able to hire as a disabled veteran using some special hiring authorities that we have. And she joined the team several weeks ago and has already made an immediate impact, if you can imagine all the engineers and getting them in line and getting things done. So she's been a great addition. As well as Murray on our RAN team. Bridget is a systems engineer that we were able to convince to join us from the Department of Defense down in Colorado Springs. So she's joined us as well. Fanu Rajan. So Fanu is not actually his name. We were talking about this last night. That means first name undefined. So in Commerce Department, they had to put something in that placeholder. So everyone calls him Fanu. Is actually Rajan is his name. He's been a great addition to our applications team. Kumar Ziganian. So he goes by Q. He helps on Pat Schwinghammer with our RAN team. And I want to give them a specific shout out, Pat and RAN. And the RAN team, working with our user advocacy team, all the data that Rich showed earlier, massaging that data to make it consumable and presentable. It's been a great working relationship with the outreach team on how to compile all of that data that Rich showed coming into the FirstNet. Peter, another network services analyst, so he will be focused on the early builders and helping those over the next year or so. Erickson is end-to-end architect that's working in some of our core network areas. Swaran on our RAN team, and then finally Jeff Posner on our applications team. So I'm very proud of the team we've assembled. I think it's worth noting they're all committed to the mission that FirstNet has to bring a wireless public safety network for public safety use. And every one of them are committed to making that happen. And I can't be more pleased with their efforts and things that you'll be hearing about later today, especially as it relates to the RFP, and all the countless hours of work that have gone into creating that. Wanted to highlight again for the RFP, as we've been going around the country for the last several months, meeting with vendors and different organizations on the RFP and the opportunity. This is a statement of objectives approach, so there's 16 objectives that we're putting in this RFP. We're not putting out 10 to 20,000 requirements that have to be met via a statement of work. So that's a key message that we've been driving home. That doesn't mean there haven't been requirements or that public safety hasn't done their job in saying what they need out of this network. That effort actually started back in the 2003 timeframe, going back to a statement of requirements documents that was put out by SAFECOM prior to any concept of a nationwide broadband network. Really what they wanted for their communications and interoperable communications moving forward. And there's been several efforts since that time that have documented their use of LTE, their use of wireless broadband, that the team has really digested and absorbed to help drive and develop this request for proposals that'll be coming out later this year. With that, I want to highlight those 13 sections in the RFP that'll be coming out and some of the key technical touch points that we've been focused on within the CTO office, primarily the statement of objectives, the Section F deliverables, all the attachments in Section J, where a lot of that meat that I referred to earlier with how this network is envisioned to be used by public safety, the instructions to the offerers, and again, the evaluation factors for the award. That's a critical aspect on how the proposals will be evaluated as they are submitted to FirstNet. Another key message that we've been driving home is some of the differentiation with our actual spectrum, band 14. So if you notice on this chart at the top, you see the B indicator. That is the LTE standardized band. So we have band 12, band 17, 13. FirstNet again is band 14. Now the unique thing about our band is in 2013, after the Interop board from the FCC put together their final technical advisory board recommendations, which I will highlight is in the RFP as one of the Section J attachments, and that is the only place you see the requirements within the RFP, because that was mandated by the legislation. Those requirements are in Section J as part of that recommended minimal technical requirements. So the service rules came out not too shortly after that in 2013, and it actually puts our spectrum under Part 90 rules, not the traditional Part 27 rules of commercial wireless. So what does that benefit us? So that actually allows us to have higher portable/mobile devices, which I really see as a key benefit for some of these rural coverage milestones that we need to meet to make this network grow and cover those rural areas. And there's already standards in place within 3GPP for a higher power device, 1.25 watt versus the 250 milliwatt typical cellular device that we all carry around. So that's a great benefit that we've been highlighting. That gets lost, I think, in a lot of the messaging, and we've made an effort to highlight that as we move forward, and that our band is unique in some of these capabilities. And that's what we're really driving, is to get as much coverage, and leveraging this is what we see a key benefit. So I'd like to move on to the early builder projects. So these 5 projects are now, as the grant has wound down in September, they're now focused on finishing their network builds, and the team is focused on the key learning conditions, finalizing those plans, and now starting to actually execute those key learning condition plans. I'll start off with New Mexico. They've finalized some of their optimization and closeout. I haven't talked to Daryl Ackerley either since we hired away Jackie Miller, so that'll be interesting to get the report from the team. But they're also focused on some of the federal users. So there's an effort on the border down to use Band 14 on the southern border at one of the Border Patrol stations. So they're looking at leveraging those users. New Jersey, I'll point out the fact that Fred graciously hosted, I believe, Chairman Horowitz and Mike Poth, our CEO, last week for a great demo. The day before, we had our technical team focused there for an all-day long in-depth discussion of how they're leveraging the satellite capabilities, and this really a system on wheels and cell on wheels approached system for that deployables part of the network. And Fred did a great job, as usual, hosting the team, and we learned a lot from that visit, and we continue to learn a lot with some of the issues and challenges they're having with that project. LA-RICS, so they have construction completed on all but one site. Their focus now is delivering the power and backhaul to those sites. They were one of the projects that received an extension through the end of this calendar year, so the end of this month, to finish their build-out based on the grant. There has been some recent news about opt-out and what that means. That was really for the Joint Powers Authority. That was LA-RICS as a whole with the LMR and broadband. We've been told that LA City, as part of that, still plans to subscribe to the LTE network and use the public safety broadband portion of that and be subscribers on that system. They're focused now on getting ready for the Rose Bowl, so they're going to be using Band 14 on that project at the Rose Bowl and doing the support and planning for that event that's coming up. ADCOM 911, so the Denver airport sites, those 3 are installed. They're awaiting some of the power now, so they're working through the final issues with power at those 3 sites at the Denver airport, and we'll actually have coverage at that airport. The rest of the system has been deployed. They're adding users every month to that system as it moves forward. And again, it's focused in the Adams County area, just southeast of Boulder, where the office is. And then Texas, you'll hear a lot more about the Harris County system later today. You'll see a hands-on demo. I was talking with Jim earlier. I think they've got some unique things planned out, and I think the board will really enjoy getting hands on some devices and using the Band 14. They did get $5.8 million approved locally to expand that network, so they'll be using that, and I'm sure they'll go into that going forward. Some updates on our PSCR tasking and what they're focused on. So this is the work that we do in conjunction with the research and development over at the Public Safety Communications Research Program. The focus for the next year or so are vehicular network systems that we talked about at last board meeting, leveraging some of those key capabilities that we see bringing with those systems and how Band 14 can be brought to areas that have no terrestrial coverage. Some inter-network mobility, some near and far radio measurements, local and dynamic quality of service priority and preemption that we'll be hearing more about, and especially in the PSAC meeting on the next Wednesday and Thursday from the efforts they've been doing at that testing. Some of the mobile application security topics. So NIST has a a whole division and lab focused to security, not just on mobile apps, but all apps and cybersecurity and some of the theory. And we're working with them to develop some key areas within our application and device ecosystems that we want to focus on for public safety. And also continuing the formal standards development. We're on track by the end of June to have the mission critical voice features finalized within release 13 of 3GPP. So that will then allow the industry to start developing that hardware and software to support the standardized mission critical voice. And then some additional RAN modeling and simulations based on some of the information that was presented earlier in the user advocacy meeting. Wrong button. So everyone's seen this picture, I think. It made the rounds on social media. So this is a traffic jam, I believe, in China that was several months ago. And as I looked at the picture, it struck me the analogy for what we're trying to do for public safety in this network. So again, it's an end-to-end IP network. What does that mean? It's end-to-end packets. So it's packets running over a network from your device all the way through. When we have the big events, the big sporting events, if anyone's been to those, you know you can't do anything on your phone. It gets very congested. This is what happens. If you imagine each car there is a packet of data trying to get through the network. So on the big events, 9/11s, the football events, large-scale stadiums, you have all these users trying to use the network. So again, our goal is to bring a network that clears out all the lanes of the traffic so that public safety, when they need it, can use the full bandwidth and do what they need to do to save lives. So the way I envision is, picture the ambulance, fire truck, and police car now running through there with their lights on. Everyone gets out of the way. They have their capabilities that they need to do on the broadband network. So I thought that was a great slide. I wanted to bring that up and share it here as my last slide. The other thing I'd like to mention is the close work that my technical team has done with the Public Safety Advisory Committee on the taskings that you'll hear more about from Harlan later on. That was a great effort, getting the technical staff to understand some of those key operational aspects of public safety. Can't say any, the knowledge they gained working with those professionals has been invaluable, and we look forward to that continuing on in the future. And it's really helped drive a lot of the RFP and how we've approached things in that RFP. So with that, I'll stop for questions and go from there.
You know, maybe not a question, but having been involved in the early build projects early on, there's a lot of technical things that we're learning as a result of the deployment and implementation. But one of the things that I think have taken away, and I don't know if you share this view, is that, doing these projects requires the right skill. And I think some of these projects have learned that maybe people think they have relevant skill in terms of project management and that sort of thing. And I think it's really important as we think about the RFP and the offers and the people who are going to be working on this, is that in a lot of cases we can't have generalists doing this work. I mean, we've got to have people who have the technical skill, because there are things that people who've been involved in this for years have forgotten that some people, as they come in and generalists, don't know. And I think some of the projects have suffered as a result of not having the right people overseeing project management, but I'd love to have your view on that.
I would agree. And we have a team that's been dedicated to each of the 5 projects, working on the ground with the local teams as well. And we've documented not only the formal key learnings that are coming up, but I think we're up to 150, 160 informal key learnings that hit on those topics, that hit on outreach to not just the firehouses, but the communities around firehouses, as a L.A. Ricks example. In the federal outreach within the state of New Mexico, some of the efforts they've done to get them to understand, why do I want to be on the system on the border, what's this going to benefit me? So we've got those across all the projects that we've documented, and leveraging those as we develop the RFP and then going into the evaluations, how we can use that moving forward. But great comment.
Yeah, I just think it's going to be particularly important for the FirstNet team to understand that as we work with whoever the the winning bidder is in terms of having the right people on the right teams to get this network built right in a timely fashion in the right way. So just an observation. Question about PSCR.
Yes.
They received some funding recently, I believe. Do we
Yes.
benefit from any of that funding?
Absolutely. So as part of the legislation, it was based on the auction proceeds. There were certain triggers that enabled them to receive an initial $100 million out of the $300 that was in the legislation. There were certain milestones that had to be hit. So they do have that initial $100 million now, and they're focused on research and development of key topics in the legislation and also based on the summits that they've held over the last 6 to 9 months to identify those areas where they can accelerate the development of some of the key technologies for public safety broadband. So the most recent one was the Location-Based Services Summit. So they're really focused on how to locate a first responder in a building with a high degree of accuracy. So they're actually going to be using that funding to help accelerate some of those efforts. The other one is on the mission critical voice. So the team has been focused on some of the audio quality, which is near and dear to my heart with some of the work that we did on the land mobile radio efforts for digital audio quality. So they'll be pushing that within the standards. And then some of the integration of LTE and LMR, what does that mean? What can they push for that? But they have that funding now, and Derek will actually be at the PSAC meeting talking about some of those efforts and leveraging the PSAC with that going forward. So he has a checkbook is what the message is, and he'll have more details, I think, in the meetings coming up.
Well, and I think it's worth mentioning that I believe we have an excellent and always have had an excellent relationship
Absolutely.
with PSCR and Derek, and, I mean, we work hand in glove with them, but I haven't been as close to some of those projects recently, so I'm glad to hear we're working on things that are really important. So
And
that's
another
great.
point, as part of the legislation, so they work closely with us, they briefed us on their plans, they'll be talking with the PSAC, but they're also helping areas that we know we need help in. They're going to use that funding to help us on some of the key topics as we move forward as well.
Great.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
You also put up a slide with, 10 or so new additions to the team.
Yes.
I would just, where are we in the build-out of the team in terms of our end state?
Great question. So we are at what I feel is a comfortable level across all the lanes, applications, devices, radio access network, core, and system engineering and technology planning. To have that key federal staff in place, we do have the flexibility with our contract support that's existing for the evaluation that'll be coming up. But I think we have a core base of staff. We won't know for sure until we have an award what the rest of this should look like. So we've been very diligent on keeping it to what we feel would be the key staff to move forward through evaluation. And then after that award is made, have those discussions on what do we need now. And also focusing on some of the test lab build out. We do think that's a critical element for those key public safety features, quality of service, priority and preemption, and some of the future features that'll be coming on the network to have those validated in our labs and also with the close proximity with PSCR to work on that together moving forward. So I think we're in a very comfortable place right now. It was our goals from coming out of fiscal year 15 to get that key staff in place, and we're about there.
Great.
Good. Before we turn it over, I think, to Governor Douglas, I'd just like to acknowledge, and now I don't know where he is, I think Chief Dowd joined. Hi, Chief Dowd, nice to have you here. Chief Dowd, former FirstNet board member, great to have you in the audience, Chief, and I know you're still very interested in what's happening with FirstNet, so thanks for being here. With that, Governor Douglas, I think, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry, Suzanne.
I just had a question back on the congestion slide, which I think is terrific. But can you speak to the issue of congestion on the FirstNet network itself, or the lack thereof?
Great question.
Because obviously it's relevant to discussions about prioritization and definition of users, et cetera, and the picture may be misleading in that regard.
Absolutely. Great question. So the goal of the picture was to show what happens in typical events. FirstNet has 20 megahertz of spectrum. Depending on the numbers of the actual first responder users on the system, we do envision a very open system. That was really to highlight when we have those critical events, how that can happen. I don't want to steal any of Chief McEwen's thunder, but they've been working closely with my team on developing those frameworks for when public safety needs it. How do we actually implement that and make it happen? We see, 99% of the time it'll be open network. We don't have to trigger a lot of the preemption and priority capabilities that we need. There'll also be a focus in this next year on our network policies and some of those issues to ensure it's being used appropriately by the users on the network. But that's a great comment. It was really more of an example. This is what happens when you're in the large-scale events, when you have tens of millions of users on the system moving forward, and how our quality of service, priority, and preemption will allow our first responders to use the network when they need it. Great comment.
You need another slide that shows that open freeway.
I started to do some photoshopping. My God, that's too much.
No, great question, Suzanne. Yeah, exactly. So Governor Douglas, I think you have an introduction of our last report from our finance team.
Well, last but certainly not least, I mentioned earlier that the committee is really pleased with Kim's assistance in helping us get a handle on our finances and the information and she's presented, the transparency she's brought to the process has been very helpful indeed. And so it's a privilege to introduce not Fanu, but Kim, our acting chief financial officer, to give us a report on fiscal year end. Yes, or ACFO, I guess. Sorry. Those of us who aren't used to federal acronyms have fun with this. So. But Kim's going to report on the fiscal year end 15 and tell us how we're doing this year. Kim.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, everyone. I would like to take the few minutes I have this morning to just give you a brief update on how we ended fiscal year end 15. Then I'm going to focus on FY16 since we just started it, and briefly go over the milestones associated with the FY16 budget. Then I'm going to talk to you about our internal control program, which is a new and upcoming focus of the CFO's office in fiscal year 16, and then leave you with some of our goals and objectives that we have created as part of our strategic plan for FY16 and moving forward into the future. So to begin with the fiscal year end 15 progress and how we did for the whole entire fiscal year, we actually ended with about 96% of our obligations being actually used as compared to what we had budgeted. So we had our actual obligations were about $82.8 million with our budget of $86.1 million. The good news is last board meeting, we were only at 85% usage of our total obligations, so we really made some strides in the last quarter of fiscal year 15. Also, good news is all of our variances throughout the year were within the board-approved allowances. Moving on to FY15 budget expenses. We actually utilized 92% of our expense forecast for FY15. Our expenses did lag behind what was budgeted by 55%. Our actual expenses were about $47.1 million, where our expense budget was at $86.4 million. The good news is we did make some strides there as well in the last quarter. And the other good news is we can actually carry over that 45% remaining into fiscal year 16, so it's not like we've lost it. We can still utilize that and leverage those funds.
And Kim, you might just comment on why we're lagging. Is it staffing up time on a time basis principally?
Yes, exactly the same reason as during the beginning of more the fiscal year 15. Our staffing, we actually had anticipated bringing on more staff in a more timely fashion. We learned the hard way that the staffing that we wanted to do the process wasn't as prompt as we had liked. And also some of our procurements, because the fiscal year 15 budget was approved later in the fiscal year, after the fiscal year began, that automatically put a lot of our procurements behind our original schedule. Yes.
Yeah, Kim, just a comment on the budget. I feel like I am speaking on Tim Bryan's behalf, you know, our former chair of the Finance Committee, but I think it's important that people realize it's not about spending everything you have just because you have it. We have very specific budget against objectives, and so it's to accomplish particular objectives and not just to spend it because it happens to be approved. So I know you don't mean that, but I just want people to understand we're pretty frugal and fiscally, I think, astute here, and I think it's something we pay a lot of attention to. So just a comment to reiterate, and I feel like I owe that to Tim. Right, Governor?
Who may be watching.
Yeah, well, I can assure you, I texted him this morning. He's very interested.
Yes, that's a very good point, Madam Chairwoman. In fact, part of our strategic plan that I'll get to in a few slides actually helps us in making sure that what we budget is in line with the strategic goals and objectives. So just briefly focusing on fiscal year 16, now that we are in FY16, the Finance Committee actually recommended that this budget be presented to the full board, and that approval from the Finance Committee occurred on August 7th. And then, as you remember, the full board approved of this FY16 budget on August 17th. So this is just a recap of what the board approved as we move forward through the fiscal year. Basically, we've got it broken down by quarter throughout the fiscal year and also by work stream. And the budget that was approved by the board was $125.9 million for FY16 as far as obligations are concerned. This includes some spectrum relocation grants that we plan to obligate in this fiscal year. Moving on to the FY16 expenses, the board approved an expense budget of $99 million for FY16 across all work streams, and this too anticipates expending some of those spectrum relocation grants during this fiscal year. Now, you might ask, where is this money going as we continue through FY16? This is just a Gantt chart of what we anticipate utilizing those funds for to complete during this fiscal year. We actually have this broken down by our 3 work streams: acquisition, consultation, and corporate services. This is not an all-encompassing illustration of everything going on at FirstNet. We have a lot going on behind the scenes, but these are critical milestones that we wanted to point out as they're critical as we move forward. One item that you will see that I would like to point out is under the corporate services work stream, we plan to complete our internal control program implementation. That actually leads me to the one item I wanted to talk about that continues to evolve during fiscal year 16. As you remember, we created an internal control program at the end of fiscal year 15. Well, we're making great strides with regard to internal controls, and we're going to continue to focus on that heavily in FY16. Internal controls, as all board members know, are so critical to making sure that we prevent fraud, waste, and misuse of funds. Now, I am happy to say that as part of our internal control program, we actually did an entity-level risk assessment of FirstNet, and the results were very, very positive. So we do have good internal controls in place. What I've done is established a policy and internal control program, an actual formal program and organization within the Office of the CFO to make sure that we continue to test and monitor our controls to make sure they're proper and in place. But we've already proven that FirstNet does have good controls in place, And as part of our effort, we have been utilizing NTIA and NIST policies and procedures. That's why we're so strong with our internal controls at this time. But what we're focusing on in FY16 is actually creating what we're calling the FirstNet Financial Manual, where we're going to create the policies specific to FirstNet and envelop all the financial management policies into this manual instead of having to rely on our...
Kim, I have a question about that. Will the work that we do in internal controls be utilized by our external auditor, and will they rely on the work we do internally?
They should be relying on what we're doing internally, yes. Yes. So lastly, what I'd like to leave you with is not only what we're doing in FY16, but beyond. We have created across FirstNet a 5-year strategic plan. And this basically encompasses everything we're doing across FirstNet. There are 4 pillars of strategic goals that we're really focusing on that create the foundation for this 5-year plan. And that includes partnerships, stakeholder engagement, innovation, and people and organization. But we've taken this a step further. Not only have we created this 5-year strategic goal and objective plan, but we've also developed what I'm calling authority priority goals, and what goals and objectives we're going to be focusing on in FY16 specific. And our work continues with this strategic plan in developing performance targets and actually creating metrics to monitor how well we are doing against those targets. So this is just a preview of how the strategic plan is looking. We do plan on sharing with you the full 5-year plan at a future board meeting.
You know, a question that Barry had on the technology committee, how are you doing on staffing? You haven't talked about that. Are you fully staffed, or are you still trying to staff your team?
We are still staffing.
Okay.
I did identify a few areas where we do need more staff. We were fortunate to hire a director of our policy and internal control organization, Mr. John Wobbleton. And we've also brought on a couple new budget staff to help us out on the budget arena, filling behind vacancies that we had. We are also planning on, so we're still looking for our executive assistant, but we're also looking at hiring a chief accountant to focus on cost accounting and also monitoring and interpreting all the accounting standards that we have to deal with within FirstNet, both the FASAB and the FASB accounting standards. So we will be filling that position. I'm anxious to get a cost accounting environment in place so we have more transparency than what we have today. And as my director of policy and internal control, John Wobbleton, continues to assess his organization, since that is so new, we do plan on hiring additional staff to support the policy and internal control organization in the near future.
Great. Kim, the chairman mentioned the external auditors, and I know the FY15 audit's underway now. What's the time frame? When might that be completed, do you think?
The FY15 audit we're looking for it to be completed in the February time frame. It did seem to slip possibly into March, but we're really trying to get it finished in February. And so far, so good.
Good. Any other questions of committee members or board members?
No, thank you, Kim.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
I think we've come to the end of our committee meetings, but I wanted to give the board members an opportunity for any comments, observations, questions for any of the presentations that might have occurred. Give you one last shot at our staff. Any shots? Yeah, well, you know, we have law enforcement in here, so you can talk about shots, right? Anyway, I want to thank the FirstNet management team for a good update. Obviously, lots going on, lots of progress, but I appreciate the focus, and I appreciate the accomplishment of the objectives that you set out. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but I think we've created a good foundation for going forward as we consider the RFP for the rest of the meeting. So with that, unless there's no other business on behalf of the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, Terry. Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any objections to it? I think we're adjourned. Thank you very much.